Point, Ideas that Impact. I'm Brigadier General Shane Reeves, the Dean at the United States Military Academy at West Point. Through a series of discussions, we will show you a different side of West Point, where we will make even our most complex initiatives accessible to broad audiences, and give you an inside view of our cross-disciplinary work which is being applied throughout the world. I'm excited to welcome our guest, renowned entrepreneur and technologist, best known for founding Oculus VR, the company that led the way in advancing virtual reality technology. While still a teenager, he began building VR headsets in his parents' garage, which led to the launch of Oculus and introduced the Oculus Rift through a record-breaking Kickstarter campaign. Just 2 years later, he was hired by Facebook, now Meta, after they acquired Oculus for $2 billion, accelerating the development of consumer virtual reality worldwide. After Oculus, our guest founded Anduril Industries, a defense technology company focused on developing advanced autonomous systems and AI-enabled tools to support U.S. and allied national security. Our guest, Mr. Palmer Luckey, has demonstrated bold experimentation, technical curiosity, and entrepreneurial risk-taking, and has reshaped entire industries. And by the way, cadets, it's not every day you get to hear from a billionaire who wears Hawaiian shirts and who's closer in age to you than he is to me, right? So please join me in welcoming Mr. Palmer Luckey to the United States Military Academy. We were meant to have dinner last night at the superintendent's quarters, and you skipped out on me. The excuse I heard was because you had to go to dinner with the President of the United States, and the Vice President of the United States, and the Prime Minister of Japan. Now, people skip out on dinner with me all the time. Soup doesn't even tell me when he's not coming to dinner. He just doesn't show up. But I have to say, that was one of the better excuses I've ever heard for skipping dinner with me. So how was the dinner?
It was really good. So I was at the White House for other business. And then yesterday was the bilateral exchange between the Japanese delegation and the United States. And I'm a big fan of Japan and our relationship with Japan. I used to go to Japan 4 times a year when I was running Oculus VR because I worked with all the game developers there. And I even speak just a little bit of Japanese. And so I was worried the whole thing was going to be blown up. And apparently it went fantastic.
Seemed to have worked out.
And because it went well, they said, Palmer, you should totally come. And I said, I'm supposed to go to West Point.
Wait a minute, so did the president say, Palmer, you should totally come? Is that how he said it?
No, it was something like that. It was like, the dinner, you're here for it, right? And I said, I said, oh no, Mr. President, I'm actually here mostly on state business. I just met with Marco, and there's some stuff that we're doing. And he said, oh, that's a huge mistake. Don't worry about it. You'll be going tonight. And I said, oh, I'm actually doing something at West Point. He said, I'm sure you can do it tomorrow. And they put me right next to Takechi, and I'm a huge fan of her from a distance. So I was very starstruck.
Sounds great, but what really, in my opinion, put you and elevated you in the list of our all-time visitors at the United States Military Academy is that this morning you went over to Arvin and you did this right here. Show that picture, please. That's right.
Oh, thanks for picking a good one.
Yeah, that's right. A little bit of combat swim, right? You might be too exhausted for this talk. Are you okay?
I'm okay.
Okay.
I was feeling optimistic going in because I said, well, these guys, they've got to go to do a whole bunch of other athletics today. They got to pace themselves. I can go in as long as I don't die. I'll be okay. I made it to like 2 minutes and 3 seconds, and then I turned to Jeff and I said, I have a problem, and he hauled me out.
You get big street cred for that. Big street cred. Okay, you're also a collector. I
Yep.
read that you own a U.S. Navy Mark V Special Operations craft.
I do.
And 2 submarines.
I do.
I don't know if that's that unusual for most, right? So
They're smaller submarines. They're smaller than anything the U.S. Navy operates outside of the research submersible space.
Well, this got us thinking. Do you know, and I'm sure you know this, every year before the Army-Navy game, our civil engineers build a wooden boat that we then burn. There it is, right there. That's a sub. We built that a few years ago. Okay, it's not real, but then this is what we do to it. Show the next picture. Okay, we burn it to the ground. So I was going to ask the cadets, what do you think? Should Mr. Luckey donate one of his subs to us to burn to the ground? You don't have to answer that right now. There's a lot of pressure.
I'll tell you. You guys tell me what kind of pallets you're going to light on fire to burn through 8 inches of steel.
Yeah.
And we can talk about it.
So let me launch into some questions, and we will get to the cadets' questions. What got you started? And what do you attribute your success to? You started very young, and you've been very successful.
I attribute it largely to my mom homeschooling me when I was young. And then as I got older, to be a teenager, she let me pursue basically whatever I was interested in. As long as I was doing well on standardized testing, she just would let me do whatever I wanted with my time. And if I did poorly in a subject on standardized testing, then I was going to be beat over the head with a tutor. And you learn very quickly that you need to manage your studies. She let me start going to community college when I was 14. I then dropped out when I was 19 to start Oculus VR, which I had been working on virtual reality headsets since I was 16. There's not that many parents that are willing to let their kids wander like that.
Yeah.
And so if I would not have been able to do that, I would definitely have never gotten to where I am.
How have you thanked your mom?
What's that?
How have you thanked your mother for all that?
Oh no, she's been plenty thanked. I did the basketball thing. I signed the contract, sold my company, got my money, and then I bought my mom a house. So I bought her a house in Newport Beach.
It's nice.
It's a good trade. It works out. I got the better side of the deal.
That's a pretty good deal for your mom. It's a nice balance between 15 and doing whatever you want, and then where they go to college? Right here, United States Military Academy. That's what I would recommend. Okay, so as we look around the world today, and we had a great conversation this morning. We see an increasing level of conflict. The ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine, where 70% of those 2 million plus casualties are due to drones. Israel's war with the Iranian proxies, and of course now open conflict with Iran. Not to mention China's increasingly aggressive and coercive actions in the South China Sea. So how do you see all of this playing out from a geopolitical perspective over the next, say, 3 to 4 years?
So you got to take this with a pound of salt,
Sure.
Because I've gotten some things right. I've gotten a lot of things wrong. Yeah. I was one of the people who, at the beginning of this renewed invasion of Ukraine, I was of the opinion that Putin was going to do an extremely limited incursion into a handful of eastern towns full of people who really liked Russia, and he was just going to declare victory. I was telling people, I cringed thinking about it. I was in a thing sort of like this, but much smaller, and I said, I just can't see Putin remotely trying to go for Kyiv. I can't see him trying to do any kind of large-scale offensive, and it was not 4 days later that that's exactly what happened. Yeah. So really take it with a pound of salt.
But that being the disclaimer, what do you think? Do you think that is the great threat, China?
I think China's the big threat. I would say we should follow this Russia-Ukraine conflict very closely, and there are certainly things to be learned, but we should not overfit to that problem. We can't say the future of warfare looks like the war currently taking out between two very uniquely tied nations with uniquely tied militaries, a uniquely tied national fabric right on each other's borders. What they're doing is trench warfare plus modern warfare in a very bizarro way. It is not what a fight with China will look like. It's not what a fight with North Korea, for example, would look like. It is its own weird, unique thing. And I'm only hammering on this because some people say, we need to make sure we learn from the war in Ukraine. We need to make sure we build tools that can win that one. And people say that the United States is great at building the tools that allow it to win the last war that it fought. I'm very afraid that we're about to jump into a world where we build a military to fight the last war that Ukraine fought.
So if you're building the military to win in a future conflict, which you're right, there's a famous quote from Secretary Gates that says we're 100% successful at being inaccurate about what the next war will be.
That's right.
I'm paraphrasing them, but if you were going to build the military to be successful for the conflict that is not in the future, it's here and increasingly growing, what is it? What's it look like?
I think the most important thing by far when you're building a military, building the weapons that power it, is to remember that your initial goal is to stop the fight from occurring, right? We have some of these critical missiles. We are literally shooting them thousands of times faster than they can be manufactured. I think the most important thing is to build weapons that we can actually manufacture. That means designing weapons and force structures and concepts of employment that we can actually build and sustain for the long run. You look at World War II. There's a bit of a misnomer about what actually happened on the industrial side. The classic story, and you've probably all heard it, is that we turned all of our car factories into tank factories, and we turned all our tractor factories into bomber factories, and that whole mix. That is partially true. What we actually did was design weapon systems that could be manufactured in a car factory. They remained car factories. They just started making tanks. It was things like the level of heat treatment you could do to steel, the thickness of things, how we fastened them, the radius that you could press with a single stage bench into a piece of steel. These were part of the inherent design process of these. Like the bombers that we started cranking out were not the ones that we designed before we decided to reindustrialize our war machine. Like we didn't take all our car factories and start building a bunch of like World War I, post-World War I aircraft. We had to design new airplanes that could actually be mass manufacturable, mass producible. And there's a huge difference. Look at planes that we started building right after Pearl Harbor versus before. Before you had a lot of hand crafting, hand gluing, laminating, stretching, fitting. Everything after that, heavier planes, less performance, but it was just bam, 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 rivet, 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 crappy glue weld over the whole thing. Have you ever seen the welds on a World War II tank? I highly encourage you to look at them in the museum. Has anyone ever welded? There's a lot of welders here. Go look at those tanks, and they are worse than the worst welds you've ever seen, but it's because they were doing them like this. I mean, but the point is, the United States needs to think the same way.
But
we need to build weapons that can be made by our existing automotive factories, our existing agricultural implement factories. We need to build things where we could actually build 1,000 a day rather than 1,000 a decade.
Do you think realistically, though, the United States can compete with China with low-cost, mass-produced weapons, especially if they become more sophisticated, say autonomous?
The good news that we have with China is we know exactly what they want to do within like certain bounds. So China's not trying to build a military that can do everything around the world. They're not even trying to just outbuild us in a general way. Yes, they might have more missiles than us. Like they might, let's say, ballistic missiles that they're going to use to take out all of the airports and ports in Taiwan ahead of an amphibious landing. But at some point, they have to get a bunch of amphibious landing craft and maybe limited aerial support onto Taiwan to land on one of the handful of places on the island you can actually land in force. And then they have to move enough material that doesn't get sunk to the bottom of the strait to Taiwan to not just invade, but occupy for probably years against a hostile resisting force. Think about Afghanistan or Iraq, and you've got Bob building IEDs. Imagine that instead he's the guy building your iPhone. Like they are gonna have a hard time taking and holding Taiwan. And so I guess my point is, like, can we out-manufacture them? No, but we don't need to out-manufacture them to make the situation I've just described infeasible. There's a world where they have 100 times more ballistic missiles than us, and we still have enough between us and our allies to deny them access to Taiwan. And this is my crazy theory, and people can disagree with me, but I'm just gonna point out, nobody in history has ever built a gigantic amphibious landing force, used it once, and then dismantled it, except for the United States. We are the sole example in history. People will point out other ones that were defeated, other ones that got destroyed by storms. But if they succeed, I think history and then also the words out of Xi Jinping's own mouth shows if they take Taiwan, they're immediately gonna hop over to Okinawa and or part of the Philippines, maybe part of Vietnam as well. Korea, they probably stay away from for a variety of reasons. But I don't know if anyone's seen this, but you have Xi Jinping going out now in the last year saying, oh, I was in our national archives and I was reading about the Ryukyu Islands, which is Okinawa. He says, I found out that 650 years ago, they actually sent this gift to us. And that means that they're a tributary state to China. And it's a national embarrassment that we did not defend them from the Imperial Japanese invasion. Therefore, we need to reconsider the Ryukyu Islands issue. And he's not saying this because he actually loves wandering the national archives and looking up obscure tributary states. They are constructing a national narrative that would allow them to convince their people to start with Taiwan, end with a lot of our Pacific allies.
If I go back to weapons and the weapons of the future,
Yep.
again, I highlight the importance of drones and the way they're multi-layered, the way they're connected to the space domain.
Yep.
When you think about the drone technology of today and going forward, what are some of the things you think we'll start to see come out of it?
So the first thing is that all of these schemes around radio frequency links and fiber optics and all that, they're probably going to go away because it's going to be cheaper, better, faster, more resilient to just have onboard autonomy do basically everything. It seems that is the way that things will inevitably move.
Can you do that low cost?
It'll actually be cheaper. So like right now, there's a lot of weird factors that make compute outside of China and Taiwan more expensive to try and do this well enough. But if you're familiar with Moore's Law, which predicts that transistor counts will double in a given footprint and cost every 18 months or so, at the same price. Like we're like 2 Moore's Law 18-month cycles away from it being much cheaper to have this level of autonomy, which is on Anduril drones today, like higher end stuff. The chips cost hundreds of dollars today, which is like twice as much as one of these fiber optic rails or 3 times as much as a crappy radio. You just wait 3 or 4 years, it's gonna be cheaper than all those things, less jammable, more resilient. We are right at that cost breakover point. And in the context of a weapon system, it's already kind of a rounding error. Like in my $200,000 Barracuda cruise missile, a $300 chip is not the thing that is driving that price. And if it allows me to be completely resistant to all jamming systems, not just on the communications, but also things like navigation. Like if I can navigate not off of GPS or any other radio, but I can actually just basically have it do it the way that a pilot would. You look out the window and you drive to the place you need to go until you see the thing you need and go to it. It's actually cheaper than all the alternatives already today.
So one of the things you just mentioned, and this will probably be one of the great challenges for these cadets as in time, is Counter-UAS.
Yep.
And you mentioned how we're burning through stock so quickly with these exquisite weapons and these interceptors and all of these various efforts to counter or mitigate the drone threat. How do we make that cost effective? I mean, what is this? Is it directed energy? Is it microwaves? What is going to be the solution that's going to allow us to have a counter-UAS strategy that is cost effective, easily deployable, and can defeat the drone threat? So
we need a few things. And this is very, very self-serving because we're doing most of the counter-drone work for SOCOM and a lot of it for the Army as well, and starting to do more for the Marines. So like, I'm very engaged in this problem. But in general, here's what we need. First, we need to tie together all of these systems. Every sensor needs to be a sensor for every effector and vice versa. If they cannot work together, you will not get the most out of them. And if you have just a single system trying to do everything, it is going to be way more expensive, much less effective, and it will not scale to the threat that you might see of hundreds or thousands of simultaneous attacks. So first, everything must be networked and working together, passing off tracks seamlessly without a human having to hand those over manually. It needs to be a common data format, and people have to make sure that no manufacturers are allowed to stovepipe their stuff into their specific system. It has to be open, interoperable standards, just like we've seen the domestic commercial technology industry develop for things like web interoperability. The second thing that we need to do, you asked, is it microwaves? Is it directed energy? Is it lasers? Is it kinetics? It is all of those things because you need to impose costs in each level. Lasers are really good at shooting down drones today because nobody's designing drones to survive against lasers. It is not that hard to make a drone survive against a laser. We can get into detail if you want, but suffice to say, trip to Home Depot and $10 will make a drone 100 times more survivable against a laser than just an unprotected plastic, which is petroleum, drone you can buy from Best Buy. Similarly, there are lots of ways you can fry normal drones with high-powered microwaves or electromagnetic pulses. There's things that you can do, again, by going to Home Depot, where you can make it 1,000 times more survivable, literally making the range of these systems go from tens of kilometers down to simply meters. And then there are things you can do to make yourself more survivable against kinetics. There are things you can do like solid rocket boosters that shove you out of the way at the last second and bring you out of the probable kill radius. But here's the trick. It is almost impossible to build something that can stop all 3 of those at the same time. You impose almost impossible design constraints on an attack drone designer when you say, yep, you're gonna have to survive against lasers, and maybe they're not the world's best lasers, but there will be some lasers, there will be some high-powered microwaves, there will be some kinetics. Now I need to make something that flies long ranges, carries a useful payload the whole way, and somehow survives all of these systems at the same time, working together. That's really, really hard. And even if I can't stop them, I'm gonna take payload away. Their bombs are gonna have to get smaller. Their range is gonna have to go down. Now they have to get in closer, which means other weapon systems can deal with them before they even launch. So it's a really virtuous cycle to have these things working together. But I will tell you the final thing at the top of my pinnacle, kinetics need to be reusable. We need to get away from this idea that we throw away every interceptor every single time. It'll never work. It's a total folly. And we've never actually won a war fighting against aircraft at any size or scale in that way. So like, we cannot build multi-million-dollar missiles or even $100,000 missiles where we just throw away the engine and the seeker and the computer and the airframe and everything every single time we shoot down one target. You will never be able to build something cheap enough to make sense going up against small, low-cost, mass-produced drones. So what do we need to do? We need to basically think about scaling down the fighter-interceptor model to interceptors that are very, very fast, maybe turbine-powered, maybe rocket-powered. I love turbines, but there's people doing rockets that are interesting too. And we need to have stuff that can go out there, destroy things using explosives or just pure kinetic energy, and then they need to come back so they can be refueled, rearmed, and reused. Now I'm not throwing away my seeker, I'm not throwing away my airframe, I'm not having the logistics of, oh, I just burned up my whole Patriot battery, I have to somehow get a semi-truck full of missiles to the front line. If I have a reusable system, I'm only using up whatever fuel or kinetics I use. So reusable kinetics, it's absolutely critical. Nobody is taking it seriously enough. And this has been upsetting me for a while. But as I was telling some cadets out on the front steps, because of things going on in Iran, finally, some SOCOM and Army customers are going to start fielding a reusable version of our Roadrunner interceptor. Roadrunner it's this twin-jet VTOL microfighter that shoots stuff down. It was always designed as a reusable system. And then we ran into a bunch of policy problems. And so you run into these traditional and actual policy and legal problems.
It's interesting as you talk about policy and bureaucracy. I mean, it's almost like you're saying lawyers are part of the problem.
I didn't say those words.
I know. As you think about that, it's not the technology. It's actually more of regulatory framework or policy framework. So what are some things that we need to make the entire nation, not just from an industrial base, but from a political or policy perspective, that would make us a more lethal nation?
The good news is I think most of this is happening. So I don't think that we're totally screwed, it's all totally broken and nobody knows it and we need to start changing. Things are already changing. So for example, there's a lot of projects that are being run as open competitions where multiple companies can come in using their own money to develop things and they compete with each other at a shoot-off and the best one or two companies win the program. I think that makes way more sense than selecting things on the basis of who has the best PowerPoint team. That is how it has been for a long time. The people who know how to use PowerPoint and Excel the best.
Well, that's how I became a lieutenant colonel. I was really good at PowerPoint up through lieutenant colonel.
And look how far you've come.
I know. It's very powerful.
The system has rewarded a particular type of engineering, and it is not the type where people go out and invest their own money to move extremely fast and then build the capability. So that's already changing. Even at a high level, the Golden Dome project. That's how they're running it. It is a competition where companies are spending their own money not to develop a little gizmo or gadget. They're developing space-based missile interceptors on their own dime, and then there's going to be a shoot-off probably next summer, and people are going to try to shoot missiles down from space using their own money, and then the top one or two companies are going to get contracts for a huge number of space-based weapons. Like I said, there's room to be optimistic. One other thing that I know I already hit on it, but we need to start from the beginning valuing mass producibility in a very serious way. I'm not going to get my way on this for a variety of political reasons, but I would love to see, and this doesn't even help my company. I make less money in this theoretical world, but I didn't get into defense because I wanted to make money. I'd already made money.
Tony Stark, right?
I do love Iron Man.
Of course.
It's great because he's like Batman. He has money and gadgets that he made himself, which is all I've got going for me. Anyway, I would love, if I could wave my magic wand, I would love someone to say, look, any weapon that is part of our large-scale deterrent capability to have China knowing that we can fight day 10, 100, and 1,000, you literally have to demonstrate it being made in a Ford or GM or John Deere or Caterpillar factory. You literally need to show that your work instructions, your components, your training, you can go to a Caterpillar factory, train them how to make it in 1 week, and missiles start coming off the line. And I would love to see that just evenly applied across more and more things. What we do right now is like the World War I model. It's handcrafted, it's exquisite. It would take you, even if you were gonna ramp up, years to train people into building that thing. What we need to do is if I could do one thing, every weapon that is important can be mass produced at a scale that actually matters by the industry America actually has, or as a consolation prize, our close allies. If it could only be made by a bunch of Japanese automotive workers, that would make me sad, but a lot less sad than not being able to make it at all.
Running these companies and knowing your connection to the industrial base, what are things you look for in let's say, a young leader?
When I look at a young leader, I try to find people who, like well, there's two types. There's people who are outside the company and people who are inside the company. If you're outside the company, when I interview people, I always ask, what have you done that you didn't need to do? I don't care what you did for your high school project that you were basically forced by the state-mandated education system to put time into. I want to know, what did you do after you did your state-mandated educational activities that you took time out of your life, and instead of watching TV or going to Disneyland, you put your time into something that you wanted to bring into this world because it wouldn't have existed otherwise. Sometimes that's alone. Sometimes that's people working with other people. That doesn't have to be a technical thing. There's people like, oh, I put together a club to do this thing. I put together this volunteer group that did X, Y, or Z. The people who have made things that would not exist otherwise, but for their will to bring it into the world, are my favorite types of leaders. You know that they're motivated not because it's a paycheck, but because they care about doing things. Inside the company, I look for people who are doing things effectively inside my company, who have gone above and beyond, again, to make things happen beyond what was expected of them. So not just like, oh, we met the goal, but I put in time, and I went and I did this vendor visit, and I did this and I did that, and I actually re-architected this thing because I wanted it to be better than it needed to be. And I'll give an example. There's a guy named Eli, and we call him at Anduril still the king intern, because he was our first intern we ever hired when our company was 15 people. And so we hired him. He was a freshman in college, and we hired him. He came to work for us for a year, and then he dropped out of school. And then by the time he was like 19, or maybe he had just turned 20, he was the lead on a product that is now one of our multi-billion-dollar product lines. And now he's like 26. And he's like the guy running that whole thing. And so like he's leading a major developmental team working on multiple incredible new technologies. And it's because he was the type of guy who embodied exactly what I'm talking about. And then the last one is when I started Oculus, I hired all my friends who helped me start my internet forum, Mod Retro, which was for modifying game consoles. And it was similar. Like we were just a bunch of weirdo nerds trying to modify game consoles to show off to other people on the internet. And I said, you know what? That's what I want. I want a bunch of weirdo nerds who are just building stuff because they want to show what they can do. And that's how Oculus started. And then they all came, they all quit Facebook when they fired me, and they came with me to Anduril. So I look for that in leadership too. If you have started an internet forum with me when I was 15 years old, you have a high chance of being in my leadership team.
All right, let me go to some cadets over here, please.
If I seem short, it's not because I'm not taking you seriously. It's because I'm looking at the count, and I want to try to get to everybody rather than go too long in any one thing.
All right, thank you for being here. Sir, something that makes Anduril so unique is that you've never been like unapologetic or try to master a close cooperation with the military and the government. The name itself means like flame of the West. In your mind, what makes our society and our way of life so unique and worth protecting? Like, why don't you just open it up and sell it to the highest bidder, whoever that may be?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, the very first reason is because the last time that I sold my company, they fired me 3 years later. And so just, something my dad always told me is make different mistakes. And so maybe I'm going to regret eventually going public. Maybe I'm going to regret what I'm doing, but like that taught me that your control on something really is tenuous. And if you don't make it a priority to keep that, and I've made it a priority this time. Our board of directors is 3 people. Me and 2 of my co-founders. That's it. We've never given a board seat to directors, never given them any voting rights. And that means that I'm able to steer it the way that I think that it needs to be. It also means that even when we're public, I'm not going to give any voting rights away to even our public shareholders. That probably will reduce our stock price somewhat because people are sometimes scared of that. But I think it's important to make sure we're not taken over by foreign interests, by hostile interests, competitive interests that, I mean, during the Cold War, post-Cold War consolidation years, there were a lot of companies that were basically acquired so they could be killed and shut down, so that existing business lines in other companies could be more profitable without competition. I just really don't want that to happen. I think that Anduril is way more valuable as a company that is ideologically motivated. You know it. It's the flame of the West. We take a position on these things. We are, I'd say, a nonpartisan but political company. We are not taking a side in any American partisan issue between parties, but the things that are unifying, like the United States should have a stronger military than our adversaries. We should not allow China or Russia to lead a new world order through military might. Like these are nonpartisan issues or bipartisan issues. So that's the second part of the question. The first part of the question, like what makes America great? I mean, there's so many things, and most of them would be a cliche, right? I could talk about our capital markets, our freedom of speech, the freedom to self-govern and self-determine our paths, not just legally, but also culturally. There's a bunch of European nations who have somewhat similar legal rights to the United States, and yet you don't see the things that are downstream of them the way that you do in the United States. Why is that? It's because we culturally have that as well. And I think like we need to preserve our legal rights. We also need to preserve those unique cultural abilities. And I'm sorry to end with a cliche, but what other country could someone like me, 19 years old, living in a camper trailer, working a minimum wage job, start a company that he sells for billions of dollars? Like and even if you could name like the one guy in another country, he's like the one. Here in America, there's hundreds of people like that. And I think that is downstream of everything that I just talked about.
Great. Go ahead, please.
What was your initial reaction to Facebook changing the name from Oculus to Meta?
I am still a believer in the idea of virtual reality as a world-dominating technology. I said, look, Mark Zuckerberg, he believes in VR more than anybody. I'm in second place.
Thank you.
Over here, please.
Sir, as a young leader, what key lessons have you learned about leading highly talented individuals while also navigating a rapidly changing organization?
I have learned that, especially in an organization that is growing rapidly and moving rapidly, you have to have leaders that you can trust to execute without you micromanaging. And like, I'm not saying I do nothing and I never check in with them, but like the most important thing is really just to not get in their way. And oftentimes they're gonna have so much more context working on it every day. Like I'm not enough of a genius to come in from the top rope and pretend that I know exactly what's going on and beat them up over it. I'll give you an example. I met with 2 OpenAI executives at the White House yesterday. We were just briefly. It wasn't a formal meeting. They were leaving a meeting. I was coming, and Greg Brockman said, "Hey, how are things going on the such and such project that our teams are working together on?" I said, I honestly couldn't tell you. I haven't heard anything about it in a month. I directed that team on what to do. I assume it's going well. He said, yeah, I had no idea either. I assume it must be going well. And we're like, yeah, it must be going well. No, maybe it's not, but if it is going well, this is a great story.
Over here, please.
Sir, you talked about unifying the systems between kinetic, laser, EMPs, and then like your wave your magic wand and all that accomplished. Where do you see your company fitting into it if that happened?
Sure. So we're doing a number of things both on like the unified command and control interface side, which is like the part you actually see with your eyeballs. That's actually not the hardest part. The hardest part is all of these totally different communication standards, the way that tracks are represented, the way that they are, like what even a track actually is so different by system that to build something that can take all of these different things and put it into one common layer, it's extremely difficult. Yeah, there's also just literally a lot of physical interoperability layers you need to deal with, like radios on different frequencies, a variety of different networking equipment that uses different physical transport layers. I'd say 20 years from now, it's gonna be nice and slick and clean and everything's gonna talk to one another. And there are standards being put in place as to what a track actually is, like how you represent even the vector of a target and like how regularly you update it to be considered high quality enough to actually even report that vector. There are standards coming together, but right now it is a horrible Wild West.
Sure, please.
So, sir, traditionally, men and women have been the ones on the battlefield doing the fight. But the way things are moving and the way Anduril is pushing towards, it seems like the battlefield is going to be more autonomous. So where do you see like a traditional infantry fitting into this new battlefield? And how close are we to like a Terminator? And are you worried about an AI Armageddon?
I am not worried about AI Armageddon on my like top 10 threat list. So to be clear, like, it's clearly a thing that one could worry about. I think we're so far away from it compared to things like tailored biological weapons. Like I'm so much more worried about dumb AI in the hands of evil people than I am hyper intelligent, truly sentient, hostile AI. I think I just have to rank my problems, and that one's further down the list. If things are advancing, I am one of the people who believes we'll be able to see it advancing and getting scary. Not that, like, I do not believe in the AI gets brilliant overnight and invents new physics and teleports into all the labs and steals all the nukes. Like, I don't believe in that. In terms of Terminators, whenever we want. Humanoid robots are already good enough to walk around and carry guns and shoot them if we want. If you watch Terminator, you'll note that the T-800 and even the later T-1000, they're not actually particularly competent soldiers. Like, it's very realistic, you know, like, he's not actually running all that fast. He's not moving that fast. He's not maneuvering indoor spaces very well. I actually always appreciate that. He's unstoppable. You can't stop him. But he's not actually there. So I would say, when people say, what about Terminators? I remind them that your average Special Forces operator today is actually on a totally different level than a Terminator. So I think if you put infantrymen versus Terminator, I think you actually probably win. I'm okay with the Terminators. In terms of the big picture question, like, are we going to have more and more autonomy? Are there going to be less people on the battlefield? I'd argue that this is part of a process that's been going on for a very, 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 very long time. Like, we are now past the point where battles are lines of people massed together, stabbing and fighting and slicing each other. Battles do take place at a distance, a lot of them beyond visual range. And I think that autonomy is going to change how those wars are fought. They're going to make certain types of targeting much better. They're going to make certain types of wars much easier to fight. But I actually don't think it's going to be that radical of a shift as people think. I think most of the applications of AI are not going to be like the Terminator at the front lines. Because at the end of the day, you still need people to take and hold land, to interact with. Unless you're just trying to glass everything, we probably can't just send in the Terminators. And in roles where you're doing that, there's probably better ways than the Terminators. So I don't know. Maybe I'm being too cynical, but despite being a sci-fi fan, I think the world probably actually looks a lot more like current conflicts, but more concentrated than any real change in the nature of fighting.
Thank you, sir.
Please.
Sir, what were some challenges you faced when transitioning from the personal technology industry to the national defense sector?
When you're selling technology to people, you have to convince them one at a time, millions of people. And you do that with social media ads and TV ads and featured pieces and gaming magazines. And what you find out is that when you work with the government, the decision makers aren't a million people. It's actually pretty small. These are people who are hyper competent. They often have very strong opinions about solutions already in the market, whether they're good or not, whether or not you're going to be able to meet that bar. You're just trying to get them to care about it at all. Selling to the government, I mean, every decision maker that we've ever had to convince would probably fit in this auditorium. Even though the dollars are much, much larger, because I don't have to convince you to wear something. I have to convince your boss's boss's boss and the program managers who are running that to do it. And that's just a very, very different thing. And I think I struggled with that transition because in the consumer market too, you move as fast as you want. Like, you run a new marketing campaign, you add a new feature, oh my God, your sales have just gone up double overnight because everyone recognized, oh, this is so good, this is so awesome, I'm gonna buy this thing. And in the government, you say, look I have just doubled the performance. They say, wonderful, there's no reprocurement of this capability for 10 years. So I've had to get much better at that. Internally, we call it not building the Batmobile. It means not building the cool thing that you think would be super sweet and awesome, but actually makes no sense because there's no customer for it. And I say this because Bruce Wayne, something they never examined in the comics or in the Batman movies is the fact that he's nuts for building the Batmobile, and he does it every single time. He's like, oh, I'm in this dark city, and there's no parking. It's basically Manhattan. I need a 40-foot long jet-powered car. That's what I need to fight crime. And like it's actually his most insane part of his persona. It's not the trauma. It's building the Batmobile. And so I tell my employees, we cannot build the Batmobile. We need to focus on things that are actually in cycle, can actually get funded and actually get deployed, or we're just wasting our own time stroking our egos.
The Batmobile reference might be the greatest one I've had in this auditorium in my entire
Don't
time.
build the Batmobile.
Very good. All right, please, over here.
Sir, you mentioned a lot of issues you had with red tape and policies regarding usable kinetics. How do you deal with those kind of like red tape issues, especially with regards to like tradition versus innovation?
I think that you have to push on the door that seems to have the loosest lock. Like sometimes it's a matter of just having a conversation with somebody and pointing out like, hey, there's this huge change. The legislation allows you within your existing statutory authority to just make this internal policy change, and you could fix this. And I've had success with that. Other times, it's the legislators who make some of these decisions. And in that case, you can go to the people who are in these oversight roles and you can say, hey, there's this big problem. Maybe they need direction from you to tell them what I just told them. But explaining why it is within the law that they've actually passed. Like something's like, oh, well, Congress passed this law saying I can't do that. I say, that's not true. They say, well, I think it is. And sometimes it's helpful for the person who sponsored the bill to say, I'm the guy who wrote the bill and you're interpreting it wrong and here's why. Like that has helped. And then I hate to admit it, but sometimes you just have to go up as high up the chain as you can and say, hey, nobody ever got fired for doing what their predecessor did, and we have a case where somebody they're not willing to take a big risk as they see it to do something. They need some top cover. They need someone higher up to say, you know what, the rules are either not gonna apply in this case, or we're gonna have an exemption, or we're gonna have a waiver, or I'm just gonna tell you this is what needs to happen, and people can say, all right, he's now the one who's going to take the heat for this, and I find that especially when things like that happen, it usually, if it goes well, then it usually resolves into a more stable long-term condition, and if it goes poorly, then you get in a lot of trouble.
Please.
Sir, I understand you're very interested in the subterranean domain.
Absolutely.
Could you talk about how the Army might play a role in that?
I'm trying to get people to believe that the next warfighting domain is the crust of the earth, that we're going to move people and eventually people, but mostly material and weapons and effects through the crust of the earth, just like we move them through the air or through the ocean. I think that the way the Army might take a role is developing a belief that this is actually real and this is actually possible, and then taking a lead and actually fielding this to solve certain problems that subterranean weapons could uniquely solve today. The very, very big picture is the US and the Soviets both believed in submarines during the Cold War. They were both building prototypes of nuclear-powered submarines, manned ones. The Soviets lost their prototype in the crust of the earth, which is like a failure, but also you have to get pretty far to be losing submarines in the crust of the earth. The thing that has changed is autonomy means you don't have to have a person aboard to do intelligent tasking and navigation. And so the diameter of what you need can go down to, instead of feet, inches or even millimeters. The ideal vehicle is probably hundreds of meters long, a bunch of train cars of explosives and effects and a variety of other things, and then a unique thing that I've made that is really, really good at getting rid of dirt and gasifying it, that allows it to dig through the front. The cool thing about digging is that diameter is expensive and length is free. If I dig a 1 foot long, 1 inch diameter tunnel, every foot of stuff I pull through after that is basically energy free. It takes no work. So diameter is the thing that kills you on these systems. If you can use autonomy to build useful systems that are little teeny tiny snake trains, I'll encourage everybody to look into something that's been on my mind lately, which is Socrates, what he said about the written word. It's very interesting as people talk about AI and whether or not it's going to take over our thinking, and is it going to make us all dumber? It's very interesting to read. He really hated letters and words. He believed that everything should be verbally transmitted, that society needed to have oral tradition. He said that using the written word to aid you in your tasks contributes to weak memory, superficial understanding, the ability to outsource your thinking to others. And I'm like, wow, it sounds like he's talking about ChatGPT. You could just put ChatGPT in there. I could use ChatGPT to do a find and replace of all of this stuff. Anyway, it's something I've been thinking about a lot. I wonder if we do end up actually losing a lot, but gaining more in the process, or if we just lose. Who knows?
Sir.
Can you inspire them to be courageous and inspire them, most importantly, to be creative so they can reach that potential in their lives?
Yes. I cast 7th level inspiration. You're all now inspired to be more disciplined than I am, but with all of the good looks and with all the brilliance. And I'll end up more realistically. This world has a lot of holes that need to be filled. I'm working on a few of them. There's a few things that I'm doing, but a lot of people, they think that the people like me have just found all of the holes and we're working on all of the problems. And there are so many more. And in America, this is a country where there are a dozen, 100, 1,000 more spots for companies like Anduril to be founded, for companies like Oculus to be founded. I've started 3 multi-billion-dollar companies, and I'm only 33. And I appreciate the kind words and how nobody looks like me or talks like me, but I'm I'm really, really good at the things that I am good at, and I'm bad at most of the rest. And this is a country where anyone can become really, really, really good at something. So if you find that thing and you're better than everybody else at it, then you just need to maximize and go all in on that.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, please give them a round of applause. Please be sure to tune in to the Inside West Point Ideas That Impact podcast next month. Remember, you can find this podcast as well as the other podcasts, journals, and books hosted or published by the West Point Press at westpointpress.com. So until next time.